Hey everyone, it's Dylan from Harmonic Design here with another YouTube tutorial video. This time about how to build a vanilla JavaScript carousel from the ground up. It's going to be super lightweight, it's going to be super quick and easy, and I think you'll learn a lot. The original inspiration is actually this photo from a Instagram profile called Daily Web Design. First of all, I just think it's a pretty design. Great use of colors, great use of elements and fonts and all that. But it was really the carousel at the bottom that kind of was the, I guess, main inspiration. So let's actually open this image up here larger so that we can get a better look at it. So this is what the carousel that they designed is. I like, how the general layout of it. I like how it's got the arrows centered in the middle, and I like how it appears that whatever the middle item is, it's got an active class on it to change both its design and its positioning in the carousel. And I just think that's kind of really interesting. I built so many things. I built accordions and sliders and so many things, but I've never actually built a carousel before, so I thought it'd be fun to build one from the ground up. And we'll uncover a lot of challenges that some of you watching this have probably never come across, and you'll get a much deeper understanding of JavaScript and especially how the DOM works, because we're going to be using a lot of absolute positioning of elements. We're going to be cloning and deleting elements and nodes. We're going to be doing a lot of kind of really cool stuff like that. So let's jump in and get started here. And here we are with a quick spoiler. This is what we're building. This is what you'll see on the GitHub. So if I just refresh, we got 3 items here. We got our middle item being given a active class. And I'm not sure how well the screen recording is going to pick it up, but butter smooth animations. It looks great. It works great. And you can find the full code in the description to GitHub. So the first thing we need is we're going to need these 3 files. We need an index.html file, we need a script file, and we need a style sheet, and that's it. Let's open it up in whatever editor you like to use. I'm just going to use VS Code. I spelt that wrong, whatever, it's all good. We still open the file. Now let's take a look here. So here we have the main index file, and the only thing to know here is that I'm just importing the style sheet. And then what I have here is I have the main HTML markup for what our carousel is going to be. And I'm calling it HD Carousel, Harmonic Design Carousel, because I'm not very original and I just prefix all my products with HD. So here we have the main outer wrapper for the carousel. Here we have the navigation for the carousel. And then here we have the actual carousel items. Inside our script file, we have nothing because we're going to start coding it. And then we have our style sheet, which is really nothing important. I just have these 2 elements here just to kind of position the carousel more centered on the page. And then I have some styles here for the carousel itself. So the wrapper, I'm giving it display grid and using grid template rows to force it to have 2 rows. So that this here will be 1 row. This here will be another row. This way the navigation will be underneath in a different row. It just makes kind of just styling things a lot easier. Here I have the carousel itself set to position relative. That's because the items are absolute. So we want the items to be contained within the carousel and not on the entire document. And then here I have overflow X clip. Now that's probably something a little weird and a little interesting to you. Most people you see doing a carousel will actually do overflow hidden. But we're doing overflow X clip, and there is a reason for that, but we'll get into that little trick in a bit. But it'll probably save you a lot of trouble down the line. Then the carousel items itself, I just have some minor styling here just to make it look a little nicer. This right here, this transition is huge. This is what's going to actually animate the carousels whenever we kind of do a new tick, whenever we go next or previous. So let's actually open this up and take a look at how it looks by default. Pretty ugly. The reason is because remember, we're doing position absolute. It's actually might be interesting. Carousels are kind of long and thin, right? So we could probably get away with doing something like this, right? Probably should have used a tiling manager for this, but that's foresight that I do not have. So right now we're using position absolute, and we just got everything kind of pinned to the top left. What we're going to do is we're now going to use JavaScript to figure out how to actually cycle and position these. So let's get started with the actual JavaScript itself. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create a new class. I'm just going to call our class HD Carousel. Inside this class, we need a constructor. Our constructor will take an element. Sure, that's good enough for now. Now let's set some options. Let's set some, so I'm going to set version equals 0.1. And inside our constructor, I'm going to say console.log HD Carousel. By the way, you don't need to do this. This is just something I do for all of my kind of products. It just kind of makes things a bit more branded, I guess you could say, as well as just making it easy to track what version a user is using, which is just good for customer support and stuff, but you don't need to do this. There we go. So let's actually just open up a, well, actually we're not actually calling the, so let's do new HD Carousel. And you can see we got HD Carousel version 0.1 init. But what we have here is we're actually, well, we'll get into that in a bit. Let's first talk about what options and settings we need for the carousel. So I guess let's do EL. So EL will just be a place for us to store the main carousel element. That way we can easily reference it whenever we need. We need something called items, which will be an array. It'll actually be a, sorry, this isn't an object. It'll actually be like an array of nodes. It'll be an array of like HTML elements. It'll be an array of this. It'll contain this. What else do we need? We need size. I'm so used to using objects, I keep using the colon. So what the size will be is, for instance, in that original example I showed you, there were 3 items showing on the page at a single time. So that's what this will be. This will be so we can change this to 5 and it'll show 5 items, or we can change it to 2. You get the idea. What else do we need? We need something to store. We need some kind of variable name to store some of the calculations, some of the math. I'll call it item. And sure, this one can in fact be an object, although it still needs to be an equal. So we'll say width 0, we'll say gap. So gap will be like, if let's just say we position these next to each other, should they be touching each other or should we have some kind of gap next to them? So that's what gap's going to be for. And I actually don't know if I'm going to need this. We'll figure out whether we need this, but I'm going to just have a variable here called left that'll help figure out like offsets with the gap. But I'm not sure whether we'll actually end up needing that. Do we need anything else? I don't think we need anything else right now. That should be good enough. So now that we got our main variables, let's actually set our stuff here. So let's go this.el equals el. So what we're doing is we're setting this to the value of this. Now, if I were like building this out to be used by tens of thousands of other people around the world, I would add in some like basic validation. Like this is just pseudocode. This code won't actually work. But I'll do something like if type of el does not equal div console.error a div was not correctly passed. And then I'll just return. So if I were to like refresh, you'll see that we get this error here. Now saying a div was not correctly returned. So instead of using my like little pseudocode here, you would actually check to see what EL is and check out what, you know, whether it's a node, whether it's a valid element, that kind of thing. But we're not going to do that. We're just going to go nice and simple here. So we're setting the EL. Now what we need to do is we need to figure out what the width of each item will be. So for instance, if I go up here, you can see here in the blue highlighted box, that's the width of our carousel. Now, if we're showing 3 items, right? We're showing 3 items here, you know, at a time, then we need to figure out what the width is of each item so that they perfectly fill 3. Now, we're going to need another thing here called gap, aren't we? So for now, I'm just going to set gap to 0 because we'll deal with the gap. I know it doesn't seem like it, but I actually do know how to use a keyboard. So we'll figure out what the gap is to later. For now, we're just not going to have any gap, and we'll just like actually stack them side by side. But we're going to need gap for later. So let's figure out what that size is. So let's create a new function here. We'll make it a asynchronous function called get size, I guess makes sense. Sure. And what this will do is it'll take the width of the element of the carousel, and it'll divide that by size, and that's what we'll use to get the width. So we'll say let width equal this dot el dot client width. And then we'll say w equals w divided by this dot size, and then we'll just return w. And now here in our constructor, should we put it on? No. So here's the thing: you can't actually await constructor or async. This doesn't work. So what instead I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new function here. I'm going to say this dot init, and we'll make this asynchronous. Right? This init function will be asynchronous, and this is how we can ensure that we set this. We'll say this dot item dot width, which is this parameter right here, that value there, equals await get size, or sorry, this dot get size. So let's actually console log out this so we can confirm that everything is working. Now let's refresh the page here. Go to client width is undefined. Oh, it's because I'm not actually passing anything through here. So let's actually pass something through here. So something I didn't talk about, this is the full, this is like the kind of full HTML markup that you need for the accordion. Well, I don't want to have to create all of this every time I call an accordion. What I would like to do is I would like to do something like this. Or sorry, did I say accordion? Carousel. Right, so I would like to do something like this. ID equals like and subscribe, and then just immediately put in whatever items I want right in here. And then what I would like to do is I would like the script to just automatically take this and turn it into this. So we're actually ignoring this outer div, and we're basically assuming that everything we have and need is right here inside of this inner div. So what we need to actually grab is we just need to grab this div here, and let's actually give it an ID. Yay! So now here I'll just say const el equals document.get element by ID, like and subscribe, and then we'll just pass in el here. So now if I refresh, there we go. Now it's working because we're actually passing an element to it. Yep, so we can see EL is being correctly taken there. We can see the items correctly got the width there. Well, I'm presuming that's right. So another thing that we might want to do here is we're only taking the EL, but we might want to also take a second parameter that'll be an object called settings. And we're not going to use this right now, we'll add this in later. But what this will do is that this will allow us to override, you know, for instance, the size, the gap, I guess just the size and the gap for now. You know, it'll allow us to override more options if we add more options in later. And the reason for that is you might have multiple accordions on the same page, and you might want each accordion to have different settings. You might want the first accordion to only show 3 at a time. You might want the second accordion to show 5 at a time. So we're going to need a way to pass custom settings on a I keep saying accordion. I'm so sorry, it's a carousel. So we're going to need a way to set options and settings on a per carousel basis. But once again, we'll get into that in a bit. So now that I'm here, I'm actually realizing we actually need something else as well. We need to store items. So we're going to say this dot items equals el dot get elements by class name HD carousel item. Let's see whether that worked. Good. Wait, did it? Yeah, good. So we're now storing all of our items. So that's basically most of the kind of starting data that we need. Now we can actually just start building this out, loop through each item and position them correctly. So now that we've got our init function, we can do, let's call it build. Let's create the function called build. So what this function will do, why is this not working? Oh, I don't actually need the word function. So what this will do is this will loop through all of the items and set its value. So let's do for let I equals 0. Well, I is less than this dot items dot length I plus plus. We'll say this dot items I dot style dot width equals this dot item dot width. So what we're doing is we're looping through every single item and we're giving it a width of what we set here. So let's take a look and make sure that works. And it's not working. Why aren't you not doing anything? Oh. I is less than. I typed in a greater than symbol. Still not working though. Did I not call build? Oh, I see. I didn't add a pixel. I need to set. You need to set the unit as well. There we go. Perfect. It's working. So now we got all of that. Now we got the width done. We also need to set the left offset. So you know what could be interesting? You can do this dot items I dot style dot left equals, and this is where it gets cool. We can say this dot item dot width times I plus pixel. So what this will do, its first run through I is 0. So it's saying 0 times, you know, whatever. Let's just for simplicity say this is 100. So it's saying 100 times 0 is 0. So we're setting the very first item to a left of 0. The second time I is going to be worth 1. So we're saying 100 times 1. It's going to offset it by 100, then 200, then 300, and so on. So let's take a look at that. Beauty, it works. Hallelujah. So now that we actually have them positioned, you can probably see that we have another issue here, which is that the items are covering our navigation. The way to fix that is to figure out what the height is and then set that explicitly, which we can probably do in the init function. Yeah, let's do it in the init function. So here we'll just say this dot el dot style dot nope dot height equals this dot items. We'll just arbitrarily choose the very first item in the list. Dot client height. Wide is, oh my god, guys, plus pixels, and that should fix that. It didn't, because wait, huh? So type error, cannot set client height. Oh wait, what am I? I swear I know how to use keyboards, everyone. I promise you. But there we go. Now we actually have the correct height setting of the carousel. Right, you can see here it's well, it's not even. There we go. We got the correct height set here, which is allowing the previous and next buttons to actually be visible. So now we got that working, let's actually set the next and previous. And this is where something that is kind of cool. We're going to start cloning nodes. So what we want to do here, let's actually create a new function here called clone. Async clone. We'll say we need actually we can just do position equals next. So we'll send it a position, and based off of the position, we'll clone either the end or the beginning. So here we'll say, well, let's say let's item equals 0. And then we'll use the position to figure out which item we're going to clone. So we'll say if position equals next. So what we're going to do here, so if we're moving next, so if we click next, all of these elements move one position over to the right, which means we need a new element on the right. So what we want to do is we actually want to clone the first element and add it to the right. So we'll say item equals this dot items 0. And then else, so if it's not next, if it's previous, we'll say item equals this dot items dot length -1. And that -1 is very important because you gotta remember arrays start at 0, right? So if I say, if there's an array with 10 elements in it, then items.length will be 10. Problem is, if we try to call this.items10, that actually means that there's 11 items in the array, but there aren't 11. It'll give you an error. So we need to basically offset it by 1 to make sure that we're calling the last item. So now we're going to see something really cool. We'll just say let's see equal item dot clone node true. So now what we've done is we've taken whichever, whatever item, whatever node item ends up being, and we're making an exact copy of it. And now we need to say if position equals next, we need to add this item to either the beginning or the end. So if we're going so if we click next, everything ships to the left. We clone the first one, add it to the right. So what we need to do is we need to append this. So we'll say this .el.append C. Else this .el.prepend C. And that should work, but we'll figure out whether I made a logical issue here, whether there's a flaw in my reasoning here, or whether this works. So the first thing we need to do when we start up is we actually need to clone, because right now, if I take a look at this, right, we have all of our elements here. Let me resize, thank you. So we have all of our elements. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 4 and 5 are currently hidden off the screen, right? So if I click next, that's completely fine because everything gets shifted over to the 1. The 1 gets hidden, 2 moves here, 3 moves there, 4 moves from here to here. Still works because there's an element here able to move. But what happens if I click previous? Well, everything would presumably move to the right. The problem is there's no element here to the left of the 1. It doesn't exist. So there's nothing to move over, so we'll end up with 1, 2, and that's it. This will be blank. So what we need to do is we need to, as soon as we start up, we need to clone the last element in the list here. So I guess we want to do it before build. So we're going to say await this dot clone previous. So let's see if this works. Am I genius or am I dumb? So if I look here, we have, yep, we have 5. We have 1. We have 2, 3, 4, and 5. Perfect. But I actually forgot to do something. We actually don't want to, we now have 2 5s here. This very last div is 5, and this div is also 5. So what we need to do is, back here on clone, we need to actually delete the original item. So we'll just say item.remove, and now we won't get that duplication. So if I refresh, we got 5. If I go back to the bottom, the last one is now 4. It's not 5 anymore. Beauty. So now the issue is that if we were just to start up, we're starting with 5 and then 1, 2, but that's not what we want. We actually want to start with 1 and then 2. So way that traditional carousels work is they basically start by also automatically moving over to the 1. But because we're only doing 1 step at a time, I think there's an easier way to do this. I think this will work. So let's just say let L, so L will stand for left, equal this dot item dot width times -1. So just for example, if width is 100, then this will start at -100. And instead of this dot item dot width, we'll just say L. Oh wait, no, sorry. This one should still be L. This one should be L. This one should always stay with the width. And then what we'll do is we'll say L equals L plus this dot item dot width. So what this should do is it should make it so that the 5 starts actually over here and then 1 will be there. So that's a good sign. Perfect. So you can see here 5 is hidden over there. Then we got 1, 2, 3, 4. So now that that's done, let's actually build in the steps so that we can move the carousel by a step each time we want. So for that, we'll actually call a function here, or sorry, we'll create a function called next. I guess we don't need to get crazy. Let's just call it next. So if we're going next, I think I might be a genius. I just thought of something that is going to make this so much easier. If we clone it, we can just immediately rebuild after, because we're already doing all the calculations on the positioning here anyways. And because we're styling the transition, it can't be that easy. I must be missing something. Well, let's just try it, but I think this will frickin' work. I think this will work. So what we need to do is we just need to actually go, await this dot clone next. Await this dot build. And will that work? It can't be that easy. Let's set a timeout here. Actually, let's do a set interval. So let's set an interval every, I don't know, 2 seconds. And we'll just say this dot next. It can't be this easy. Let's check this out. This dot next is not a oh right, because I'm running it inside, so we got the scope here. Okay, so we basically need to do an arrow function here. Well, actually, I can just do it this way, right? I can probably just do this. It's probably all I need. We're just doing this just to test, so it's working. Perfect. See how it's even looped? Because I'm constantly cloning every time, it's always going to work. It's always, I can't believe it's this easy. Okay. Okay, so now that we got that working, let's actually do the next and previous buttons. So let's actually get rid of that for now. So this is something I'm trying to think of. How do we get to this? Because we're capturing basically this element here. I guess we can just use the parent. We'll just use the parent. Okay, so under the, I guess we can actually probably do it here. So we'll say this.el.parents elements.get elements by class name. Oh shit, what did I call them? Carousel nav item. We'll say const nav. So one thing I didn't talk about before is inside our next and previous buttons, I have these data attributes that I'm using to get the direction that we're heading in. So we can see if you click next, it's got a custom data direction of previous and opposite for next. So now I'm just going to say actually, you know what, just do a for loop. And we're going to actually run into the same problem here that we did with the interval, where if I actually just do something like a function, then we're changing the scope. So if I were to, I can no longer call like this dot move or this dot next or anything like that. I need to, you know, because this is going to refer to the clicked element. So instead, what we're going to do is we're just going to say, we're going to do another arrow function. We're going to say this dot move, and we're going to pass along nav I, so that we can actually get the data. Because what we need is we need to know what element we clicked on, and we need to have the scope right so that we can still call methods in this class. So let's go down to next here. We're going to make a new function called move, and we'll call this, I don't know, el. We'll say let position equal el dot gets attribute data position. We'll say if position equals next, then this dot next, else this dot prev. We're actually going to need to create the previous as well. The only difference here is that we're just going to say prev. And I think this will work. Let's take a look. So if I go next. Okay, so I apparently have it reversed. Wait, why is it doing the same both ways? So for some reason, so what is... I'm guessing that this isn't accurately getting... Oh, I can already see what it is. It's not data position, it's... I called it data direction. Data dir. That's just a dumb of me. There we go. So next is now correctly working. So we can now go left and right. So this is it. Right here and now you have a fully working accordion. It's not the prettiest, but that's just really easy to fix and change with CSS. Design it however you like. But the point is we have an accordion right here up and working. And as you can see, very little actual code is needed. It's pretty straightforward and simple. But we still want to add in some options and settings here. Mainly, I want to have that gap. I do not like how it looks touching each other. We want to have a gap. So how are we going to do a gap here? So first, let's just set gap to, I don't know, 22. And we'll do, like a lot of other, they call it like margin, right? So like margin in pixels, right? So we'll call it gap. Now what we need to do is we need to actually somehow figure out how to do this. So we're going to want to go to our get size here. So right now we're just assuming that the width will always be the width evenly divided, but we actually want to offset it by that gap. So we got the width perfectly here. Now we need to figure out what the gap is. We'll say let diff equal this dot gap divided by this dot size, so that we're evenly, no, that's not right, times this dot size. Yeah. And then we'll say w equals w minus diff. So this will like make it so that the width is small. We're not adding a gap, but it'll make it so that the width is smaller for all of them. Yes. So the width is now significantly smaller for all of them, so much so that we can now almost fit 4 of them totally. But remember, we haven't actually added in the margin after, which will push it back out, hopefully, towards there. My concern is that the gap is only 22 pixels, and I feel like this is more than 60 pixels. We'll figure out what happened there. So now what we need to do is we need to go to our build function, and we need to change this since it's no longer, well, no longer accurate. So we want to keep the width the same. So we want to only do it if I is greater than 0. I don't think that's right. I mean, it did work. By the way, this gap actually looks better now, so I'm pretty sure our size is in fact wrong. Like my idea was like, so this is the size, oh right. I think I can actually just do this. Maybe I'm just overthinking this too much. I think this is actually all I need, right? Yeah, that's okay. I was just overthinking it. So I can actually just do this. There we go. That's, yeah, I was overthinking it way too much. The math is actually significantly easier. So now we have a nice gap. So let's just make sure it actually works. So what happens if I change this to 4? Works. What happens if I change the gap to 2? See? Perfectly working. This is fantastic. This is working so good. Oh, but here we go. Here you see an issue right here appear. See how kind of janky that is? There's a reason for that. You see, the way that I have this built always assumes that whatever size I have size plus 2 elements. The reason is because we need at least 1 element extra on the right, and we need at least 1 element extra on the left. That way there's something to slide into. However, I only have 5 here. So for instance, if I were to change this to 6 and do this, it should work. See, now it works perfectly. And the reason is because we have the total number of elements. So let's actually change this down to 3. We have the total amount of elements is greater than equal to the size plus 2. So let's actually detect that. Where would be a good place to detect this? Should I do it in the constructor? Or should I do it? I'm going to do it in init. So I'm going to say async, what should we call this? Set min items. We'll call it set min items. So we'll actually just say this dot set min items and we'll await it. So what we need to do is we need to basically just grab all of the items and just clone them again. I'm trying to think of what the easiest way to do this is. I mean, I could loop through it, but doing a loop would actually cause a bit of an issue. And I don't know if I really want to do that. So I guess the first thing we want to do is we want to say const min items equals this dot size plus 2. Sorry, plus 2. That way we just have an easier, say min items. We'll say if, yeah, items dot length is less than minimum items, then we'll say let's items length equal, I guess we're gonna have to do the loop, so we'll say this dot items dot length. So we're going to store the total length of it at the start. That way when we loop through and do something like for let I equal 0, well I is less than items dot length I plus plus. So this way, because here's the thing, I'm going to start cloning and making duplications of these items, which will increase the items dot length, which will basically get us stuck in a permanent loop. So what I'm doing is I'm storing item length here first. That way, instead of saying this dot items dot length, I can instead say items length, and we're not getting stuck in a permanent loop. And now we're going to do something very similar to what we did with the clone. I'm going to say let c equal items I dot clone node true, and then let's actually just append it. I'm going to say this dot el dot append c. And then we could basically just do this check again. We're going to do the check again. Yeah, this will work, right? Didn't work. Reference error, items is not defined. Where did I type in items like an idiot? There we go. So I only built 3, so we only have 3 items here in our carousel, and yet we got a perfectly smooth looping animal. and it works beautifully. Like even if I were to set this to 13, I mean, because of the padding of the items, it's kind of overflowing. But as far as the actual functionality of the carousel, it still works perfectly. So let's set that back to 3, and let's do something that set this back to 5 because I like it. And let's set the gap up to something, once again, a bit nicer, like 22. Oh yeah, that's nice. So let's do another option here to make it look even closer to what that original that original Instagram photo looked like. Let's say active class equals false. So what the active class will do is every time we build, we'll take a look to see whether this is set, and if it's set, we'll figure out what the middle item is and automatically give it a new class called active. In fact, let's go in here and say .hd carousel item active, and let's just give it a different background color, just to make it really stand out. So where am I building? Where do I actually want it? Yeah, I guess I do want it under build, don't I? So at the end of build, we'll do it. And we'll say if this dot active class. So if this dot active class is true, then we'll create a new function called set active. We'll scroll down here and we'll create a new function called set active. I don't think set active doesn't need to be asynchronous. Now, how are we going to do this? I guess the first thing we need to do is we need to figure out what the middle div is. Now, in a number like 3, it's pretty easy, right, to just find the middle one, right? We could just always be like, just grab the second element, it's fine. But what we actually want to do is we want this to work whether it's you're using 3 items or 10 items or 20 items or anything like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say let what we actually want the median, don't we? We want the median. So I'm going to say equal math dot round. Then I guess we'll do size, this dot size divided by 2. So this will always give us the middle number, right? So this dot size divided by 2 is literally just divided by 50%. But then we're rounding the number to make sure it's always a whole integer, right? And now what we need to do is we need to basically set. There's lots of ways to do it, but I'm a lazy boy. Let's do it the easy way. So I'm going to loop through each of the items. So we're going to loop through each of the items. And what I'm going to say is, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the class. What did I call it? I already forgot what I called it. Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So we're going to remove the active class from every element, just in case it has it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if I equals m, then instead of removing the class, we're going to add it. I actually think that's it. That's all we need to do. So right now we're not doing anything because I didn't actually have it set to true. So let's actually set this to true now. Oh, look at that, worked. Worked. We now have the middle one always being the active class. Does it work for alternatives? Think if I do 5. Look at that. So of course it'll always work better with even numbers than odd numbers than even numbers. Like for instance, if I set this to 4, it's going to be a little weird because there is no perfectly middle one, right? But as you can see, it still works incredibly well. Now, something I want to do here is, if you remember, I talked about this overflow X clip. Now the reason for that is for this. So I want the active class to be up by 2 REM. So if I were to refresh, actually let's go back to 3 just because it looks nicer. Refresh. See how it's like up now? It's working great. Let's actually just make that a little bit less. Let's only do 1. There we go. right? So now it's actually rising above and it looks great. Now look what happens if instead of the overflow X clip, I do overflow hidden. See? Now it's clipping out even through the top and bottom. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, Dylan, you can just go overflow X hidden. Except it still doesn't help us. Right? It still actually clips it out. So sorry, it still overflows it out, hides it. So by doing overflow clip, we're forcing the X-axis to work the way we want it, while still allowing the Y-axis to kind of be free. So we're actually already got this looking pretty close as far as functionality design. You got nice little smooth animations. It's working pretty good. The last thing I want to do is I just want to focus on our navigation here. So let's make this navigation a little nicer now. So we have a class here called, and what we'll do is we'll just say display. We could probably just display flex, can't we? Let's actually do it in here to make it a bit easier. Let's make that bigger so you can see it better. So here we have this. Let's go display flex. We'll go justify center. Then for the nav items, actually that's pretty much all we need. Let's go back to this. I sometimes like to use the console because even I struggle to remember these. Justify content, justify cell, justify items. I don't remember which is the one I actually want here. So I like to do that just to make things a bit easier on myself. And I'm gonna say padding. There we go. Let's do. Once again, I'm not really designing this to look pretty. I'm just trying to show you how it works here. Let's actually add a cursor pointer. Well, that's ugly as all hell. Why is that so ugly, actually? I wasn't expecting it to be this big. I'm assuming it's because of this. What if I do, instead of 1FR, what if I do max content? Yeah, okay, that's better. So let's change that. That way it's a bit nicer there. Where was that original? Here we go. And there we go. Personally, it's obviously a little too big. But that's all because I'm like literally calling it previous and next. It would be better if I used like just arrows like the original design was and stuff. You know, instead of red, let's do, I don't know, even that's probably nicer. Yeah, this is pretty great. I'm pretty happy with this. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put this entire thing on GitHub so that you can use it and experiment with it and have fun with yourselves. The only real difference that I'm going to probably have between what you're seeing here on the video and what eventually goes up to GitHub is, like I said earlier, I'm going to kind of make it so that instead of needing to have this entire thing just to do the carousel, you really only need, well, I guess you would, I want to make it so that on the HTML side, you really only need to have this in the HTML and that the script will automatically create the wrappers and the nav for you. That way you don't need to do it yourself manually each time. I'm going to do some like maybe like screen reader stuff, like just, you know, even something like, you know, area role equals button goes a long way to making this more more accessible. So I'm going to be doing some stuff like that. An automatic timer. You know, like right now you have to manually press next or previous, which personally for me is usually the best way to go about it. But sometimes you might want to have this on an automatic timer, just automatically every 8 seconds or whatever, go next, put in the timer. Oh, also having settings override so that we can do something like pass in settings. So we can do something like size 3, you know, speed 1000 or whatever settings that we end up going with. I'll make it so that you can pass those in as settings. So yeah, a couple minor stuff like that will be the difference between the video and the one that's finally uploaded. But overall, I'm pretty happy with actually how this turned out. Absolutely love the kind of what I'm calling the genius stroke in my own ego here of just the next and previous being stupidly simple. We're not recalculating anything. All the calculations just happen right up here in the build. And as you can see, even the build is super simple. You know, if you were to compare this to something like, you know, Owl or any other carousel plugin, I mean, this is just ridiculously simple, super lightweight, and yet still has a ton of functionality in that you still have the ability to easily change, you know, how many show, whether you want an active class, what your grid gap or margin should be. Like, everything just works pretty simply. Obviously the design of the buttons and stuff isn't the greatest. I'll probably design those nicer too. But yeah, I had a lot of fun doing this one. I hope you learned a lot. Please consider, you know, staying around, and let me know if there's any questions you have, or if you have any ideas for future projects that I can work on. Anything you have always wanted to know how to do it, or you're interested in building your own kind of lighter weight version, let me know in the comments and I'll see if I can get around to it.